There's a lot of systems connect, YouTube, Instagram,
Yeah,
everything. And we are
now we
live.
are. Good day, everyone. Welcome to today's live session on cybersecurity in the digital era. I'm Rahima, Wasti, Marketing Executive at DataProtection, and I'm thrilled to be your host today. Joining me is our esteemed founder, Mr. Philip Cutting, who will share his invaluable insights on this critical topic. Welcome, Philip.
Thank you, Rahima. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope they're invaluable. So, cybersecurity is such an important issue today in today's digital landscape that we have to consider from the very beginning, right? So, I'm excited to be delivering
Absolutely.
this to you guys. And at Lion Dev, our mission is not only to develop innovative apps, but also apps and websites, but also to ensure that they're secure and resilient against cyber threats. There's a philosophy in the security world that you should assume that your systems can and are hacked and
Mhm.
how to approach it. So I'm going to talk a lot about that today, but I'm excited about it. Guys, if you like this kind of content, like, subscribe, and let us know. And let us also know what you're interested in. So we're happy to dive deeper into this. We're only going to be able to hit the surface of this because it's a huge topic. And if you guys have like particular interest and we get enough interest in this, I got some specialists I could bring in here to really nail down some of these topics. It's a lot of fun. It's a huge topic. I'm super excited.
Perfect. That it surely is. To kick things off, Philip, can you give us a brief introduction to cybersecurity and why it is such a crucial area of focus today?
Absolutely, Rahima. Cybersecurity includes protecting systems, networks, intellectual property, and data, all from digital attacks or from accidental abuse, right? So
Mhm.
there's intentional attacks, there's incidental abuse, and then there's exploitation that can happen at many different levels. So we're looking at trying to protect our clients and yourself from all these threats that can happen in the marketplace via intentional or
Absolutely.
unintentional. Right. So ensuring robust cybersecurity means that it's vital to protect sensitive information and maintain trust in our digital services, right? And preventing potential devastating consequences. So, for instance, uh, think about how much personal information you share online via from your kids' photos or just the political opinions that you share between friends, or even your sarcastic remarks
Yeah.
between friends and jokes that could be taken
Mhm.
the wrong way, right? So, and that's not even including our banking information that we use every day in our lives, or
Mhm.
medical information, or things that happen in our lives that could be used against us when put in the wrong light. So, here at Line Pro Dev, we prioritize integrating strong security protocols into our apps and web development projects so that we're able to protect and monitor as much as possible. The concept that I initially talked about, where we assume that we're either already hacked or people are in the process of trying to hack us, makes it so that we are both open with our clients if something does happen, and that we're also monitoring the environment to make sure that we are looking and staying abroad for those attacks when they do happen. Now, maybe they never do, right? But
Yeah.
let's assume that they are happening or will happen, and
Mhm.
be very aggressive against it.
That is absolutely correct, Philip. And why do you think cybersecurity has become increasingly important in recent years?
Oh, so good question, Ramo. The increasing importance of cybersecurity can be attributed to several factors. First of
Mhm.
all, the proliferation of internet connected devices, the explosion of data that's generated, the shift towards digital transformation in various industries have all contributed towards escalating cyber threats in the landscape. On top of that, we now have AI threats where people can represent voices, they can learn how to hack better, they can use tools to automate the hacking, where normally anybody couldn't do it, but now we can have 5, 6, 10 year olds hacking and doing massive damage without really ever realizing the consequences right?
Exactly.
And just plain. So the opportunity for malicious activity is nothing like we've ever seen before. And this is even before we consider what's happening with quantum technologies for computing. And that's a whole nother world. And that's for another discussion where we talk about how to separate out systems so that when you are hacked, there's a minimal amount of damage done and a minimal amount of loss and quick reactions on how to handle that if there is a breach.
Completely agree, Philip. We've all seen headlines about data breaches affecting millions of users. It is a
Oh,
clear indicator.
Equifax, right?
Yeah,
There's tons and tons of examples of where things have gone wrong.
exactly. And what do you think about what are some of the latest trends in cyber threats that businesses and individuals should be aware of?
Okay, so we're currently seeing a rise in ransomware attacks, and phishing
Wow.
schemes, sophisticated malware. So ransomware, for example, is where it encrypts a victim's data and demands payment for its release.
Mhm.
Phishing schemes are where individuals get tricked into revealing sensitive information, and often this can happen in the form of uh, requests for loans or employment interview information. There's
Exactly.
just so many ways to trick even clever people. Can you
Yeah.
imagine the threat to our mothers and our grandmothers who are more trusting, right? Not trustworthy, of course they are, right? But more trusting to the environment around them and less savvy to the risks involved. You got to keep this in mind because your app or your website could be taken over, right?
Exactly.
And they can instantly take the trust that you have and massively exploit your clients, which is a huge threat, and you're responsible for that. In my eyes, I am as a developer feel responsible for when that happens, and that's why quick recognition of when that happens, if it ever does happen, is super important. God willing, it never does happen, but be ready for it.
Yeah, indeed, that is absolutely correct, and it's essential to stay updated. Just last month, we saw significant amount of such incidents happening on major corporation disrupting their operations for days. It's a stark reminder of how vigilant we need to be now. Can you explain
It's a really
some?
a big deal. I'm going to interject for a second to point this out. I've seen people commit suicide
Exactly.
over information released, especially women, right?
Mhm.
They are prone to this. I have seen terrible crimes perpetrated on people. So it's not just a matter of personal information being released, right? It can really
Exactly.
affect lives. And you never want to be the business owner on the other side of this. That's somebody committed suicide because of something that happened from your app or information, or you were the gateway to the exploitation of humans. So I really want to point out how critical this is and not just say, yeah, it's stupid passwords or little stuff. It's really life
Exactly.
altering for families and individuals.
It gets highness to a point. And can you explain some of the most common types of cyber attacks and how they typically work?
Sure. So some common attacks include phishing, right? Where the
Mhm.
attackers or individuals that are revealing sensitive information, malware, which encompasses various kinds of malicious software like viruses or spyware, and ransomware, where attackers are encrypting the data on a person's devices and demand money for its release or prevention of release. So, for example, a common phishing attack might involve an email that looks like it came from your bank, from PayPal,
Exactly.
or some other trusted source, even your cell phone provider, right? And where you verify your account information. And once you've entered your information, it's then stolen by the attacker. Congressmen fall victim to this, right? So don't
Yeah.
consider it lightly. It's super easy to fall into that path. And understanding these methods is the first step to defending yourself against them. And at Lion, we incorporate multiple layers of security in our applications that include real time monitoring, automatic threat detection and protection against these common attacks. These are sometimes upgraded packages for your application, right? There's costs related to this. So sometimes, eventually it always makes sense, right? But you have to kind of figure out where you are in your app lifecycle to how deep you run down this trail, right? If you're just doing your MVP and you're trying to prove a concept, it's more important to show it to people than it is to make sure you have the perfect cyber solution. But once you're going live and you got lots of users, enough users where people can recognize you in the market and start targeting your app, that's when you really need to consider this, especially when you start getting investment money from people
Yeah.
outside of your immediate circle.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct, and that is definitely very insightful. It's incredible how deceptive some of these attacks can be. My friend has been a victim to this as well. I
Mhm.
remember reading about a phishing attack where hackers used a fake job posting to collect personal information from job seekers. It goes to show how vigilant we can need to be. What are some of the best practices businesses can adopt to protect their data?
Okay, everybody's going to love this one. Use strong passwords, rotate through them regularly. Don't use the same password on multiple sites.
Mhm.
Multi-factor authentication, conducting
Okay.
regular security audits are essential practices, right? It's also important to educate employees and family members and friends and users
Okay.
about the cyber risks that are out there and establish clear um and responsive measures that make it so that you when you have a situation you know how to respond, right? So
Exactly.
just standard operating procedures is what we call them, right? SOPs. So when you have an event, right, you should know exactly what to do so that you can quickly go and change passwords, uh, reveal data, lock up data, notify whoever has been affected, right? And take quick action. It's an environment where seconds can matter. And often you can consider that the time between you when you realize you've been hacked and when the data is being abused could be moments, or it could literally be like days or weeks or months before that data is abused. So if you've had a breach,
Right.
don't take it lightly, change everything, and make sure you are protecting yourself across the spectrum.
Definitely, we never should take it lightly. And definitely, education is the key. As Line Product, as you know, we conduct regular training sessions to keep our team informed and vigilant. How can individuals ensure their personal data remains secure?
Okay, yeah. So it starts with making sure your passwords are good, making
Yeah.
sure you're enabling two-factor authentication. Uh, be super cautious whenever you're sharing personal information, right?
Mhm.
Look for changes in patterns. If you're using a phone provider, right, and all of a sudden they ask you to verify your phone number, your mother's maiden name, your social security number, right,
Yeah,
things that seem out of place, take that as a red flag and either contact them or just don't give it to them, right? A
exactly.
lot of the
Mhm.
times, apps will ask for certain information and they don't really need it, right? And that's okay if it's a mortgage or something else financial. This is different. Unfortunately, in America, we've regulated fairly frequent confirmations of personal information, and I think this was a dumb idea. Right, by legislators in America to require this kind of updates because it makes people expectant that yeah they're going to have to verify this information frequently or once a year, and it should never happen, right? This is the easiest way for hackers to get in there, say hey yeah it's time for that checkup again, government requires it, here it is, give us your information, right? And it
Exactly. It
sounds
makes
like
it easier
it
for
is
them.
as stupid.
It is. It certainly is. And with the rise of remote work, what specific cybersecurity measures should companies implement for their remote teams?
Okay, terrific. This is this is one of those things that you want to implement as you evolve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my best advice is, if you don't actually do a whole 27001 um ISO certification, go through the process of it, right? And
Right.
this process is going to help you identify threats and help
Mm-hmm.
you create a documentation and processes on how to handle threats when they do happen, right? It's a really a great process, and I encourage it for a lot of people. It can be a little pricey if you have somebody do it professionally, and if you go through the certification and the actual monitoring of it, but you're going to start off with VPN access. You're going to consider how data for employees is provided and how they get authentication keys. For us, right, we will often have to ask for certain credentials from our users. We ask that they
Mm-hmm.
change the
Right.
password for that, and we monitor that, and then we go, and when we release that information, we're like, we're done at this point. Please change your passwords. Please remove our access to this. Please make sure it's secure and solid, and
Mm-hmm.
everything we can to protect them, right? So once we ask you to do that, right?
Yeah.
If you're working with other agencies and they ask you for this access, first of all, you should be comfortable saying, hey, why do you need that, right? And they should have an answer for that. And this is not being paranoid, and you shouldn't feel bad about that. Go ahead and ask, right? They should have a good answer. And then ask, how long do you need that access, and how quickly can I get it back, right? This is fairly critical, and you should avoid giving out credentials as much as possible. But we understand there's times you have to do that, especially when you're a startup and so on, right? But take your time to make sure you're comfortable and understand what's out there and what's not. There's also ways to do your two-factor authentication, right? This should be
Yeah.
enabled on all your services, even if you're this situation where I just described where you're sharing credentials, right? You should have 2FA enabled, two-factor authentication, so that you're enabling access as it's required. And the next thing I would look at is making sure that you're physically securing your devices. There's software out there that you can install, and if somebody steals your computer or device, it can has certain procedures to lock it out.
Right.
I have a friend that I should really bring on the call to talk about
Mm-hmm.
how to secure your systems, how to do these 27001 ISO certifications, so that people can kind of dive deeper into that. But
We will look into
this
that.
this is at the business's individual layers, right?
Yeah.
With the access with the employees and with vendors and so on. When there's a lot of stuff that happens in the back end, right, from your developer side, implement a fairly large complex system of standards and
Right.
technologies to help secure a lot of stuff. But if you're going out and you're recklessly, like in an airport or a coffee shop, accessing the internet, logging into sensitive information, it's easy for people to steal that information. VPNs are one of the first things I mentioned and help protect against that. So don't be
Exactly.
afraid. Yeah, it may give you a little less performance, but take that performance loss, because once you have that security hit, you will understand what a new expense is.
That is absolutely right. At Line for that, we've also found that regular check-ins and cybersecurity drills help keep our remote team vigilant and prepared. It's crucial to create a culture of security awareness, even when working from home. Now, let's get to the question that is, how can you discuss the importance of regularity, compliance, and adhering to cybersecurity standards?
Oh, so good question, right? So a lot of compliance is forced upon us, right?
Yeah.
So compliance regulations like GDPR or CCPA are critical for legal and ethical reasons, right? And adhering to established cybersecurity standards,
Mhm.
just like I mentioned, is ISO 20001, right? Ensures
Right.
helping make sure a company's security practices are robust and up to date. For example, GDPR requires that companies protect the personal data of e-users, and non-compliance can result in significantly hefty fines very rapidly, right? So at LineProDev, we adhere to those regulations and standards to ensure that our clients' data is protected and builds trust with our users. And part of this requires that we take the minimal information, or that we take get information as it's required. There's other things, simple, like there's simple things, right? Like making sure that our apps are obfuscated, that we are using security keys in a way that we separate them from the app and we protect them, and that we are doing um, certificate management. These are the standard things, right? There's levels
Exactly.
above it, but you want to make sure that you have a basis, and this basis should be your standard operating procedures. If you're dealing with another company agency,
Mhm.
just ask them what that is and have them describe it to you. Throw some of these
Mhm.
questions that we talked about at them and see if they're fitting on that. And don't, like, understand that there's different stages where you integrate different technologies, right?
Definitely,
Maybe you
yes.
don't need to incur the cost
Uh-huh.
of some of these standards because you're only dealing in like your local state, for example, right? Maybe you need to, and maybe you need to take it to the next level because you should be looking at HEPA certificates, right? Just take a look at it, see what you need to do, and be reasonable, because there's trade-offs to costs when you're trying to decide how protected your data should be. Right now, if you're just getting a person's nickname, if you're getting their course location, right, and you have a flashlight tool, you shouldn't be going crazy, right? But
Exactly.
once you start collecting sensitive information, that's when you
Mhm.
really need to be considerate. And maybe you look at it and say, hey, do I really need this information in the first place? Right? Do I need to take the risk of managing this information? Can it hurt my users if I do, or is it going to be helpful?
Yeah. So, regulatory compliance not only protects our data but also builds trust with our clients and stakeholders. At LineProDev, we've committed to maintaining the highest standards of cybersecurity to safeguard our clients' information and comply with all relevant regulations. Moving on to the next question, what steps should businesses take to prepare for and respond to cyber incidents?
Okay, great. So every business should have an incidents response plan in place,
Exactly.
right? These are standard
Mhm.
operating procedures that everybody should understand ahead of time. Now, the client may not understand a lot of these or even think about this, but the agency that is managing your app, creating your app, or the agency that is ensuring that they have a service plan with you that makes sure that your app is up and consistently protected, right? They
Exactly.
should be doing this for you. If you have an internal team, yeah, then
Mhm.
you need to have those procedures. You need to be doing drills and practice, making sure that you are able to handle a situation if it occurs, right? So regularly testing this plan through simulations is essential. And
Mhm.
here at Lion, right, what we do is we conduct regular drills. We call this our DevOps process, right? And
Right.
we introduce chaos so
Exactly.
that we know what's going to happen and how to execute this. Now, we do this differently for each of our contracts of our clients because they require different levels of this, right? It
Absolutely, yeah.
does add a layer of expense, but again, like I said, once you're out there in the public, once you have a large user base, right? I don't mean like a mass, like millions of users, right? Once you have hundreds and thousands of users, then you need to start thinking about, hey, how do I handle this situations, right? What kind of blowback
Exactly.
is there going to be? Am I a mature product at this point? Do people expect that I have this level of preparedness, or am I just starting up and people realize that I'm just trying to get my feet under me, right? You got to understand where you're at before you're incurring certain expenses. We carry a lot on our own just to, because we have a reputation to maintain also, right? And whoever you're hiring to do the work for you, ask them, what's their
Mhm.
basis, right? What have they been hacked? Look in the news to see if they've been hacked, right? And have them explain, what's the process that happens if it does that, does, what's the cost of taking it to the next level, what is the next level, right? We always like to give this roadmap of, okay, you're here, and we, based off your current position, we recommend this level of diligence. And
Exactly.
as you grow, we think that it should be this kind of velocity where you have this kind of current risk and you're able to scale up to this risk, and here's a plan, know what to expect, right? I think it's healthy to have that plan ahead in those discussions. If you're not having those discussions with your team, they're probably a bit of either a discount agency, or they're not experienced enough to walk you through those
Exactly.
situations if they happen.
Definitely, and preparation is the absolute key. Now, moving on to the other segment where we get the questions from our audience. First one is Phil. You mentioned phishing attacks. I received an email asking for my bank details. How can I identify and avoid such scams?
Banks won't ask for this. First of all, banks won't ask, right?
Yeah.
If you get an email from a company that's asking for your banking information, you should immediately feel like these are red flags, right? You should be calling up that company directly to a known number, right?
Mhm.
And it should be a number on your statement, right? Not a number on their website, because their website might have been hacked, right? But definitely not a number in that email. Don't call that number in that email, right? So it's so easy to copy bank statements and to copy all this stuff and to deliver it there. So make sure you're looking at historical information. Look at the sender, right? Open up the details of that email and look at what the sender is to see if there's something that doesn't look right. That's one of the easiest giveaways, because most people won't do that man in the middle where they take over the end side also, right? They'll just send it from their own email. They'll put the label there, which is what most people look like, and say, yeah, Chase Bank. It looks all official, but when you look down at it, it'll say Chase Bank, Citibank, some numbers and a bunch of letters, and then .com, right? And you're like, it should be support dot you should be, so for example, it should be support or project, or Jane at support.chase.com. It should not be Jane at chasebank.com dot 12345xyz.com, right? Those are
Exactly.
obvious things, right?
Yeah.
But just when you get a weird email like that, ignore it. Call your bank, call your provider, right? If it's a
Mhm.
smaller agency, they don't have tech support, and they're asking for this information over on the line, do two things: ignore it, right? That's my first reference, or
Or
consider working with another provider, because they shouldn't be asking this information over the email in the first place, right? If there are times when you have to go in and share your bank information, where you have to connect to your systems, right? So we use, for example, we use Stripe Connect to help connect businesses with a
Mhm.
payment processor, right? It's a huge common one, and you'll see that it's through Stripe, right? It's super obvious, and the developers that make it, they can't hide it because it's a portal between Stripe and their platform. But this is very different than getting a random email that says, hey, send us your banking details because we saw some kind of problem.
Yeah, exactly. That does happen, and this is the correct way to fix it. And the other question is, can you explain why having a complex, unique password for each account is so important? It's a bit overwhelming to manage.
It's hard to manage. I use LastPass, right? There's other password systems out there, right?
Mhm.
What I like about LastPass is I can share email my passwords if I want to. I can use complex passwords for each one. I can monitor where my account's been accessed from, right?
Right.
There's a lot of systems that allow me to protect it, and it's easy to use, and it has tools to help me generate passwords for each account, so I don't have to think, right? The reason that you want to use complex passwords that don't make sense is there's password hackers out there that are able to generate a massive amount of passwords and to go out there and get your passwords. So if you're using a simple password, and on all your systems, and it's going to be the lowest common denominator system out there. Like maybe an email or something is not going to lock you out when they try a lot of attempts. And when they
Right.
hack that, they can then start fanning out to all the other systems, right? And yeah, they may not know that you have a Gmail, right? Or
Right.
specifically, they may not know this, but they're going to run this password through an automated system that checks thousands of websites and see what they can access, right? And it's very common for them to access your banking account information right away based off the information that you provided. More so, it's easy for them to request to change passwords or account accesses and redirect things
Yeah.
once they start getting access to that. So hopefully
Yeah.
that's something that's kind of we ingrain in our users in our community, because it's going to become more and more of a problem, especially if there's a downturn in the economy and people are bored, right? Or where AI has become so efficient that we have a lot of spare time, because these are things that like just kids like to do, right?
Exactly.
I of course never did any malicious hacking as a child, and it wasn't malicious. It was just me playing around. I didn't do that either. So, right. But we know kids, right? They play and they get in trouble. This is innocent, right? There's really bad characters out there. So protect yourselves, guys.
Exactly. With that, we have the other question, which is actually very interesting. With all this talk about data breaches, should I be concerned about the personal photos and information I share on social media?
I think you should. I think you should. And I'm going to step back and preach about something I do preach about sometimes, which is be really careful about the photos that you share of your children, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you share photos of your children, even just between friends or when you store them, say to yourself, would this photo be embarrassing if my son or daughter was doing a presidential campaign? Right. And that's going to help you make that choice. But in general, as far as even just your personal photos and what's out there, I would be very cautious, right? We're long past the day where we kept a lot of information on physical film, right? And it's very easy to take photos. We have a lot of trust, right? And we have a natural inclination to sometimes take photos that we shouldn't of our, of our intimate relationships, and to be more liberal about that, right?
Exactly.
And there's maturity in there, and then there's youthful, just everything we all go through as youth. So I wouldn't, for any photo platform, I wouldn't trust it, right? I would be very conscious of what I have on public storage. I would put my very private stuff on a physical drive that's disconnected. They're cheap enough nowadays. And if it's something you really care about, you get two drives or a mirroring drive. Those are easy enough to get.
Exactly. That answered our question. Philip, this has been incredibly insightful session with you. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or advice for our audience?
Okay, yes, dear. So my key advice is to stay proactive,
Mm-hmm. Right.
and cybersecurity is an ongoing process, right? It's ongoing in our personal lives and in our business. It's a constant growth process, and it's an evolution process. It's not a one size fits all. It's what's really that makes the most sense for me based off of my security requirements, my clients' needs, and where I'm at in our business's evolution, right? So what you really have to do is stay focused on being vigilant against the risks that are out there. Make sure that you educate your team and that you continuously review your security measures. Make sure that you have alerts set up, and that you are sometimes getting outside advice, especially as you grow. Get secondary advice. If you're hiring me, right, one of the things I'm going to do every once in a while is hire an outside audit from different people. So we're rotating through the experts that I know, and I do it based off of where I think they're the best for the stage, right? If you don't have somebody like me on your team, just get random people or kind of do some research, right? And I don't mean random people because that's right, but random specialists that have a great reputation out there, and have them audit the securities for you. Your agency is going to love you, right? They're not going to have any problems. Most likely, they may find some things, and
Mhm.
they're going to get to bill you a little bit extra to improve the security, so everybody's happy, right? Except for you have to pay for it, but you're going to be happy because you saved yourself a potential embarrassment. And there's no one person out there that can continually stay abreast of what's going on in the world, right? It really takes a community to protect your application and to stay up on this. So don't be shy, right? And agencies also, please go out there. Don't feel like you have to pretend to be the best specialist in security and that you're perfect. Know that you're not. Know that either you've been hacked or you're going to be hacked, and protect your clients.
Absolutely, that is completely correct. Thank you so much, Philip, for sharing your expertise with us today. And thanks to all of you, our audience, for joining us. If you found this session valuable, please like and subscribe to our LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook channels for more insightful sessions from Line Product. Until next time, stay safe and secure.
Thank you, Rahima. It's been a pleasure. And everybody stay vigilant. Don't forget to like and follow us on all those social medias just to make sure you stay safe.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, everybody.